Jon Rahm just did something no other player in LIV Golf history has done. He has now won the league's season-long individual championship 3 years in a row, every single year since he joined. That should be a moment of pure celebration. Instead, Rahm stood in front of reporters after securing the title and admitted something was bothering him. In his own words, he had a sour taste in his mouth. A 3-time champion, at the top of his sport, openly saying something feels off right after achieving history. That is not the reaction you expect from a winner, and it immediately raised questions across the golf world about what is really going on with Jon Rahm right now. In this video, we break down Rahm's historic 3rd title, exactly what he said afterward, why his comments do not fully match the celebration you would expect, and what this could mean for his path forward. For more coverage in golf, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let's start with what actually happened, because on paper, this is one of the most dominant individual achievements in LIV Golf's short history. Jon Rahm has officially claimed the LIV Golf Individual Championship for the 3rd consecutive year, meaning he has won the season-long title every single year since joining the league at the end of 2023. That is not a fluke, and it is not a case of one hot stretch carrying him through an otherwise average season. That is sustained, year-over-year dominance across an entire points race that spans the whole calendar. What makes this achievement even more remarkable is how it actually happened. Rahm did not need a big individual result at the season's final event in New York to lock up the title. He secured it despite finishing tied for 41st at LIV Golf New York, a result that, on its own, would look like a forgettable week for a player of his caliber. Instead, the cushion he built earlier in the season was so significant that even a poor final week could not stop him from claiming the crown. To put his dominance into full context, Rahm finishes the season well clear of the competition, sitting comfortably ahead of both Bryson DeChambeau in 2nd place and Lucas Herbert in 3rd. As the captain of Legion 13, he has anchored his team throughout the year while simultaneously building one of the most commanding individual seasons the league has seen, picking up victories in Hong Kong and Mexico City along the way. This is exactly the kind of season LIV Golf would want to showcase as proof that its biggest, most expensive signing is delivering on the promise that came with his move. A 3-peat as individual champion is not just a personal accomplishment for Rahm. It is a statement about the level he has continued to perform at since making one of the most talked about decisions in modern golf history. So with all of that success laid out, you would expect Jon Rahm to be beaming with pride when reporters caught up with him afterward. Instead, what came out of his mouth was something far more complicated. That is exactly what we are breaking down next. When Rahm was asked what he was most proud of from his latest LIV Golf season, his answer did not sound like a man simply celebrating a historic 3-peat. He immediately acknowledged that the last 2 weeks had not gone well for him, setting a noticeably different tone than you would expect from someone who had just secured a season-long title. Instead of leading with pride over the championship itself, Rahm pointed back to earlier moments in his season as what actually meant the most to him, specifically recalling how well he started the year with a string of runner-up finishes before finally breaking through with a win in Hong Kong. He described the way that win unfolded, building a lead, watching it slip away, and then finding a way to birdie 4 holes in a row down the stretch to get it done, as the moment he was proudest of all season. Then came the line that really stood out. Rahm openly admitted that despite everything he had accomplished, he still had, in his own words, a sour taste in his mouth because of how badly he played during the very week he clinched the title. For a player who had just made LIV Golf history, that is a strikingly honest and almost uncomfortable thing to admit publicly. He did eventually circle back to some genuine satisfaction, noting that after the previous season ended without a win, and with real questions hanging over whether he could still dominate the season-long race, coming back to win it convincingly again clearly meant something to him. But even that acknowledgement came wrapped around his admission of frustration, rather than replacing it. Put together, Rahm's reaction paints the picture of a player who is proud of his season in a broad sense, but who is far too competitive and self-critical to simply celebrate a title secured through a cushion built earlier in the year, rather than through strong play in the moment it was actually clinched. For most players, locking up a 3-peat despite a rough final week would be framed as a testament to season-long consistency. For Rahm, It clearly felt like something closer to an asterisk. That kind of reaction from a player who just made history is exactly the sort of moment that makes fans start asking bigger questions. Is this really just about one bad week in New York? Or is there something deeper going on with how Jon Rahm feels about where his game, and his season, actually stands right now? To answer that, we need to look at the full picture of his 2026 season, starting with the biggest events of all. That is exactly where we turn next. To really understand why Rahm's comments landed the way they did, you have to look past the LIV Golf standings and examine how his season actually played out on the biggest stages in golf, because that picture looks very different from his dominant points race. Across the 4 major championships this year, Rahm's results were, to put it generously, inconsistent. He finished tied for 38th at the Masters, a respectable finish but far from the kind of statement performance a player of his talent is capable of on that stage. At the Scottish Open, he came in tied for 36th. At the Open Championship, he finished tied for 46th. And at the US Open, arguably the most jarring result of his entire season, Rahm missed the cut entirely. There was one genuine bright spot in that stretch. At the PGA Championship, Rahm finished tied for 2nd, his best major championship result of the season, and a real reminder of exactly what he is capable of when everything comes together on golf's biggest stages. But one strong finish surrounded by a missed cut and a string of mid-pack results is not the kind of major championship season a player with Rahm's talent and track record is used to producing. Now placed that next to his LIV Golf season, where he dominated the points race from start to finish, picked up multiple wins, and secured a 3rd consecutive individual championship. The contrast is stark. On the LIV Golf schedule, Rahm has been nearly untouchable. On the sport's biggest, most historically significant stages, the results have been far more uneven, punctuated by one near miss and several finishes well outside serious contention. That gap likely explains a lot about why Rahm's reaction to his 3rd LIV Golf title felt so complicated. For a player who has openly discussed wanting to chase major championships and cement his legacy among the greatest players of his generation, dominating a season-long points race on one tour, while missing cuts and finishing well down the leaderboard at the events that matter most historically, is not necessarily the full validation it might look like on paper. Rahm's sour taste comment may have been about his performance that specific week in New York, but it sits inside a season where his results away from LIV Golf give him plenty of additional reasons to feel like something still is not quite clicking. That tension between dominating one tour while searching for more consistency on golf's biggest stages is exactly the kind of storyline that fuels bigger questions about where Rahm's career goes from here. And those questions become even more relevant when you consider everything else currently swirling around his situation with LIV Golf. That is exactly what we turn to next. Here is where this story connects to something much bigger than one player's mixed emotions after a title. Because Jon Rahm's comments come at a moment when his entire future with LIV Golf is already under intense scrutiny, for reasons that have nothing to do with how he played in New York. Reports throughout this season have made clear that Rahm's situation is one of the most financially significant and closely watched storylines in all of LIV Golf. He is reportedly still owed an enormous sum on his current contract, one that extends well beyond the league's current financial backing timeline, making him a central figure in ongoing conversations about the league's new investment deal and how existing player contracts get restructured going forward. Golf insiders have openly speculated about whether Rahm might look for a way out of LIV Golf entirely if the opportunity presents itself, and LIV Golf's own leadership has stopped short of confirming his long-term commitment to the league. Against that backdrop, a comment like Rahm's sour-taste admission takes on extra weight, even if he was speaking specifically about his performance that week. When a player who is already at the center of speculation about his long-term future says something feels off, even about something as narrow as one disappointing week, it naturally invites bigger questions from fans and analysts who are already watching his situation closely for any sign of where things are really headed. It is also worth remembering that Rahm's season still has real stakes left to play out. He is heading into LIV Golf Indianapolis next, followed by the team championship in Michigan, an event that, as we have covered before, still has real uncertainty hanging over whether it will even take place as scheduled this year. For a player already dealing with mixed feelings about his season and an unresolved contract situation, heading into a stretch run with that much uncertainty around it only adds to the sense that this moment in Rahm's career is far from settled. None of this means Jon Rahm is unhappy with LIV Golf as a whole, and his own words made clear he is proud of what he built across the season. But the timing of his sour taste comment, sitting right alongside ongoing questions about his contract, his major championship results, and the league's own uncertain future, is exactly why this moment resonated well beyond just one disappointing week in New York. So what does all of this mean for where Jon Rahm goes from here? That is exactly where we land in our final chapter. Step back and look at the complete picture, because Jon Rahm's third consecutive LIV Golf Individual Championship should be an unambiguous triumph, and in many ways it is. 3 straight season-long titles is a genuinely remarkable achievement, and it cements him as the most dominant individual performer LIV Golf has had since it launched. But Rahm's own reaction tells you this moment is more complicated than the trophy alone suggests. A player who is that competitive and that self-critical does not simply celebrate a title secured on the back of an early season cushion after playing poorly in the very week it was clinched. His sour taste comment was honest, and it reflected genuine frustration with how he closed out the season, even while he still appeared proud of the bigger picture. Layer on top of that a major championship season that produced one standout result at the PGA Championship surrounded by missed cuts and mid-pack finishes. And it becomes easier to understand why dominating the LIV Golf points race alone might not feel like complete validation for a player still chasing the kind of legacy built on golf's biggest stages. Add in the ongoing uncertainty around his long-term future with LIV Golf, and the unresolved questions about whether the season-ending team championship even takes place, and you start to see why this moment carries more weight than a simple celebration of a three-peat. None of this changes what Jon Rahm has accomplished. 3 consecutive individual championships is history, plain and simple. But his own words make clear that even historic achievements do not erase the bigger questions still surrounding his season, his major championship ambitions, and his future in the sport. Whether that sour taste fades into motivation for an even stronger finish, or becomes part of a bigger story about where Rahm's career goes from here, is something the golf world will be watching closely as his season heads toward its final stretch. For more coverage in golf, subscribe and hit the notification bell.